There's our doubler or our butt block on the bottom, and that's tying those two pieces together and this little piece up front. And then once this is the rear deck is on here, we'll trim all this nice and flush. And I'm kind of using the material underneath just as a guide, as we're about to add some catalyst or MEKP, methyl ethyl ketone peroxide. We've already got a pan full of resin poured up. Now, generally speaking, the hotter it is, the less catalyst you need. So you can see here we've got a piece of 3/4 inch Coosa that's about 12 inches wide, and we're going to put half of the bow deck on one side and half of the bow deck on the other, and this is going to kind of be our doubler. And I just resin coated this, and we've pre-drilled. I don't know if you can see some of the holes, but we've kind of pre-drilled everything so that our pieces back here, and you can kind of see the curvature. We're working on that. I'll show you that in a second. But we've got these pieces. So that's going to be the starboard bow deck half, and then that's the little piece right up in the front, and then you got the port half, and we got that all primed and resin coated. And you can see from this angle, you can see this bow deck is starting to come together. We got those pretty radiused corners, and again, we're using the 3/4 inch Coosa, but I duplicated some of the other curves throughout the boat and this piece of plywood, and then just cut a whole series of small, about 1 inch thick or so pieces of Coosa, screwed them to that backer, and then put one coat of mat in there. And so we got that real pretty curved transition. Right side, left side, a little piece right up in the middle. You can see we screwed the heck out of that. Y'all can see how many screws are in there. I believe there's about 80 screws, and that's about a 5-foot section. So you can see now we got the one piece splitting the seam, another piece. Tomorrow we're going to be working on these radiused edges. We got them kind of just got everything mocked up right now, but as for now, I'm going to give that a little while to just cure overnight. That way we can take it out of here and we can work on those underside pieces. But it feels good to be making some progress. Hey, I want to tell everybody that's been watching the channel how much we appreciate it. Y'all stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of boat building stuff coming up this winter. That's the underside. I had kind of come in here and I bullnosed these corners a little bit on the top side and then resin coated this. It's always a good idea to primer, and we actually shot a few more screws, probably about 15 or 20 more screws from the other direction. But there she is, all primed and ready to go. That's one piece now. I'm gonna give that resin about an hour to tack off. Once again, it's always a good idea to prime this Coosa before you apply glass to it, or even if you're gonna leave it raw, I'd recommend putting at least a coat or two of resin on it. But yeah, there she is. How about that, y'all? Looks pretty good. So we've got the all the bow deck pieces resin coated and stuck in, and a lot of folks are always curious about doing these contours, but you can see there was a series of smaller pieces. Came back with a high strength filler and filled all those. And once again, we just kind of used a little pattern, a little template to bend those around. Once this is all puttied and fiberglass in place, that'll be as strong as one piece. But you want those rounded corners on something like this when you're going forward and back, especially in the summer we wear flip-flops or maybe barefoot. You just don't want any hard corners. Makes it easier to clean the boat. And I won't lie, man, it just looks pretty. That makes it look really nice when you have those nice rounded corners. Of course, we'll have a hatch there, hatch there, hatch there. And I made these wooden braces that are just temporary to support the deck while we're sticking everything in. So that's what it is. Those will come out, so that'll be all free and open. But it's okay if you're building something like this to jig or pattern. When I was younger, my dad used to do this kind of stuff, and I used to kind of think it seemed like a waste of time. You're like, why are you spending all that time cutting out that plywood? We're not going to even use it. But a lot of times you need that to hold stuff in place, make things bend and curve or hold them. So don't be afraid to do that. We are back in the big 29-foot boat, and we got the bow deck, the forward seating, and we're working on the gunnels for this boat. That's the 3/4 inch Coosa, the 26-pound density. We got some battens here kind of laying out the nice curve up to the bow. Got it all the way around. Got some of the Irwin speed clamps holding that in place. Just a nice gradual taper. There's a shot of the rear deck. We're gonna have nice radius corners everywhere. Got our drains in the floor. You can kind of get an overview what we're doing here. There it is, y'all. Check it out. Finally got all the Coosa all the way around the sides. Bow deck, toe rails going in, bow deck in, console sitting in place. Nice wide gunnels. Built up the sides on this boat to give it a little more profile, a little more depth. Of course, that'll all blend in once we get the rub rail, everything on there. Rear deck, vertical wall in place. There's petitions in there already to kind of support that. You can see this thing's got a real pretty crown to the deck. Nice radius corners everywhere. We've been cutting Coosa for several days now. Let's do a walk around so y'all can see overview. Tons of room in this boat. It just kind of dwarfs the Kenner. You can see those real pretty caps. Super excited about that. I want to show y'all what we're doing back here in this splash basin. You can see we've got some nice curved, they're the corners, but they're not hard corners. They're curved corners. And what we're doing is we're using some thin strips of the Coosa, and I've ripped this down approximately 1 inch wide. We're resin coating one surface. And what we're doing is we're actually using the radius that's established in the pan, and then we've made these templates or jigs, and we've got a duplicate one side to the other. They are mirror images, exactly the same, so that we know that everything we put in here is going to be the same. And we're using a fiber-rated putty to butter these corners and then bond those in there one at a time. And you can see as you put them in series, you can take a series of flat pieces, and in series you can end up with that nice curve. Now the filler of choice for something like this is a product that Napa actually makes. Napa makes it. It's called Pro Strand. That's in the gallon. That's the 1013. It's a fiber-rated filler, and you mix that with like a BPO style, like a catalyst paste. There's the number on that one, but it's a blue catalyst. Mix that in thoroughly, and then what we're doing is we're using a piece of flexible foam and a clamp, and that's helping me keep this tight to the jig while that's curing. Now it looks kind of mishmash right now with all these uneven pieces, but that's okay, y'all. Those were just some trimming, some scraps, and we had a variation in length there. Once I get the rear deck fit in there, we'll establish exactly the height they need to be, and I'll come in there and we'll cut those all flush and sand a real pretty radius in there and glass those in. But that radius is going to match the other existing radiuses back here in the corners and up front and whatnot. Also, it's the same radius as we have right here where our leaning post slash live well is. We're all done, y'all. Got it fit in. There she is. Now we just kind of mocked up the deck pieces. Y'all missed me trimming this. Basically, we laid these pieces over, marked it from underneath, and cut that with a saber saw. But there she is. This boat is going to have some little toe rails or toe kicks here around the back deck. Got enough room to stand up there and cast. Got enough room to walk across. The motor well does eat a pretty good bit of space up, but this boat is going to be more of an offshore caliber boat, so we really got that nice rear deck with some bolstering there to really kind of keep you up inside the boat. So we're fixing to cut out the forward anchor hatch, and I wanted to show y'all how we set things up. Now sometimes you may never run into this, but if you're working with Coosa, you're going to be cutting holes in hatches or doors or trimming pieces, and I have found that things look better if you kind of follow the contour of the boat. And if up here on the bow you can see we've got a little bit of a arc, and what I've done is I've made some pieces of plywood that are the same width as this gap between the toe rail inside and outside, and what we're using is just a magic marker, and we're scribing, and we can kind of just push this along and get a nice consistent mark exactly where you want. And then this little block here matches the gap on the rear deck, the spacing for our hatches back there. Kind of the same deal. You can see it falls in, and then you would just slide that across while using, I like to use just a standard magic marker. It's hard to beat. And what we've done is we've used a standard sanding disc I have found that's actually the perfect radii. It's almost exactly the same radii as our standard Bomar hatches we use. And I just used it to mark that radii. And then we are using some of the Bosch, the metal medium, and just your Bosch saber saw or jigsaw. Now I'm going to be wearing a Tyvek suit, but I'm going to have my son Logan holding the vacuum so that we're pulling dust. If you don't have someone holding the vacuum pulling dust, you definitely need to be wearing some kind of respirator when you're cutting this Coosa composite. But the saber saw or jigsaw cuts it really, really well. See how that gave me something to hang on to. All right, Logan, if you want to, you can unplug the vacuum so y'all can hear. Sorry about that. And like I said, if you're cutting this stuff, it's recently had to start wearing some reading glasses for up close stuff, and when I put a respirator on, it fogs it up, so it's much easier. And there is our big Danforth anchor. I actually trimmed it down a little bit. We cut a little bit of length off of it and a little bit of width so that it was more appropriately sized. And here's the moment of truth. I hope this thing fits just like that in there beautifully. Of course, there'll be rope coiled in there and then the anchor will sit on it, but I sanded and radiused these corners and edges, took some of the sharp edges, because sometimes y'all, when you're running in rough weather and this isn't in like a anchor holder, it doesn't have something that clamps it down and holds it super tight, it's going to be sitting on rope. If you radius those corners, it'll keep the anchor from really damaging the boat. So we're at a stage now, y'all, where we have pretty much cut all the Coosa. There's a few little small pieces, but we're getting ready to fiberglass. We've had really garbage weather for like the last week or two, super cold, windy, rainy, not good fiberglass weather, but today it's perfect. We've got weather in the high 50s up into the 60s. Low humidity, bright sunshine. And so what we're doing is the last several days we have been dry fitting all these pieces of Coosa. You can see we still got rough edges, but we've kind of been marking the orientation and the direction. Been working on some of the little pieces, the little templates that go underneath and scab these edges together. And we're getting ready to actually take this thing apart now that it's all dry fit, and we're gonna go underneath this bow deck and start glassing kind of from the bottom up. All right, y'all, we're gonna do some more puttying. I'm gonna zoom down in here, and what we're doing is we're putting a real nice radius on all these corners. That'll kind of help give the fiberglass a nice transition. You see what I'm doing is I'm just taking little scoops and working my way down, 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 down. I'm gonna show y'all how I do it. One of those things, if you've never filled a radii before, we're gonna start all the way back here. I'm gonna do a little bit more. It's kind of like you want to overfill it. I like to use a fairly small blade first, and then I'm gonna transition to a slightly wider blade. I'm gonna start all the way back in this corner. I know it's a little dark, y'all. Apologize. It's well after sunset. Look how pretty that looks. Now see this a little low right there. I'm gonna back up and put a little more in. Might even start all the way back at the corner. Get a little tighter. Sometimes you have to make multiple passes. That's actually pretty good there. I've got a little bit that's I'm gonna feather with my finger here with the glove, kind of transition down to nothing and then we'll go back to where we started, right up in this corner. It's kind of dark in there. A lot of times you can take your thumb or your finger and kind of, I call tooling it out so that you got a nice, clean, smooth look. Yeah. Do some fiberglassing, and we got all of our pieces torn. So y'all saw earlier we did all the prep work, and I went ahead and I measured and cut an assortment of pieces. These two here are going to be for this forward face. Matter of fact, Logan, you might kind of circle around here. Pan, see, we've even got one already in place right up here on the bow. It wraps around. I have it clamped in place. And what we're about to do is we're about to add some catalyst, or MEKP, methyl ethyl ketone peroxide. We've already got a pan full of resin poured up. Now, generally speaking, the hotter it is, the less catalyst you need. The cooler it is, the more you need, but on average about 1.5 to 2.5%. Standard bristle brush here, and what we're going to do is just thoroughly mix that. Now you can see the swirls in there. We have a red dye that has been added to that MEKP. A lot of times it comes clear. It is not dyed. There's a little small container of dye that we add, and what that does is it allows me to see. You can see it gets a reddish tint to it, and you obviously want to mix this until there are no longer any swirls of color. I want to kind of jog that brush a couple times to work any resin that may not be mixed thoroughly. And again, we're going to kind of start from the edges, work our way around. Probably a good idea to measure this out in cc's. Again, about 1.5 to 2%, pretty typical in the cooler months. I've done this so much I kind of just know by feel. All right, that looks good. I'm gonna move this pan up in here where we can access it a little bit easier. And what I've got here is just a small, inexpensive roller that we've actually cut in half. So we've taken longer rollers, we've cut them in two, and that works really good in these tighter, smaller spots. You don't always need a big, massive roller. I'm gonna load that roller, not too dry, not too much. And I've actually kind of got this piece clamped in place over here. What I'm gonna do, matter of fact, Logan is probably gonna step outside the boat. I'm gonna show y'all again what we got here. We got some little Irwin clamps, and I'm gonna get Logan to move around, and I'm gonna swing this over, basically wet underneath this, but I'm gonna leave it clamped halfway so my placement doesn't change. All right there, Logan. And what we're gonna do, it always makes it easier, y'all, if you can. Matter of fact, Logan, you might want to swivel around on this side, is wet underneath your laminate if you can. When you're first starting, I know sometimes it's tricky to get in there, but what I'm doing is I'm just loading this roller, and I'm getting one just thin coat of resin everywhere where this piece of biaxial, which by the way, this is a 45 degree, what they call a 1708. It's made by V2 Composites. I've been real happy with them. See there, we've kind of just resin coated everything a little bit. This piece is kind of hanging here ready, and what I can do now is just swivel it back over, and it'll line right back up. And that resin kind of enables us to tack this in here a little bit easier too. Sometimes if you take it completely off and then try to bring it all the way back, it's hard to get it back in the exact location. Now we're going to start once again. I'm going to start on these corners because they usually need a little bit longer to soften. And I'm just going to start wetting this material out. The best thing to do is just get some resin on it and then just give it a second. Like, don't try to get it to saturate immediately. It's probably just not going to want to do that. It's kind of like once you get resin under it and resin on the top of it, just give it a couple minutes of soak time. I'm going to use my brush to dab in here, kind of way up under there. Logan, kind of swirl around from the very front. Maybe they can see what I'm doing here. I'm using this brush to do what I call dabbing. Works really good in these little tight corners or odd to reach places. And you can see now it's starting to already go transparent, which is what you want, but it's still going to take a minute longer for it to go fully transparent and be what I would call saturated. So now we can take these clamps off. Go ahead and load my roller. It's kind of the same deal. I can swivel this out of the way. And see, now we can swing this back around without too much drama. Pack it back into place. And here's one of the little secret weapons of fiberglass. Is a little grooved roller. Y'all may have seen this. You can pick these up at specialty fiberglass shops. Come over here this way a little bit, Logan. You can see I'm going to make a couple passes. Let me zoom in a little bit. Look at the difference just in 2 or 3 passes with this grooved roller. You can see that stripe right there. That's not a shadow. We'll see these bubbles just disappear. Watch this. You could roll and roll and roll and roll with a hair roller, and it would take a lot of effort to get there. You can really see how it's working those bubbles out. What you want is a really nice transparent laminate, no bubbles. I want to show y'all what we're working on today. Has been more the focus, and this is actually the bow deck upside down. You can see this is kind of a little step up to the anchor locker that we've already screwed on there, because I didn't want to have to go through the glass, so I went ahead and screwed it on. And we've got one layer of the 1708 biaxial glass already cut and fit, and then we got the next piece over here on our cutting table, which if you're doing a project like this, really nice to have some glass on some rollers. We got our big tape measure there, and what we're doing is we're pulling off a big blank piece. It's about 9 feet long, and then what I'm doing, or what I found that's worked really good, is just to take bricks and then hold those, and then we come around the edges and we're going to just trim. And I'm kind of using the material underneath just as a guide. You can see there's the edge of the, yeah, see there's the edge of the deck. And I'm kind of just using that as a guide. The bottom portion of the blade is hugging that. Now it's going to be a little bit long, and we'll come back and we'll trim that once it's all. In fact, that little piece there, not really good for much. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off, and it'll go in the scrap pile. So we got our 2 pieces cut, and we've got a pan of resin here, y'all, and you can see we've got these pieces just folded back, and I'm going to go ahead and wet underneath the material. Now you could have used, or I could have used a bigger roller, cover a little more ground, but this is the one I kind of had set up, and sometimes it's easier just to work with a smaller roller, but I do find that if you can wet underneath this biaxial before you lay it down, you do seem to get a better job. We did all of our prep work earlier today. We filled some screw holes, we put a nice radius on the corners, and then we're just going to roll this right back over. So we got our bricks kind of holding it in place, and we'll take a minute to tuck it down in that corner. And the first thing that we're going to saturate or wet out is going to be that corner. You don't want to wet out in other areas first. And I'm just using my fingers to tuck it. Always want to wear gloves when you're doing this. For sure you're sure. Go ahead and hit that with a little resin. The corners, you always want to hit them first for this back half. Fold this up and roll it over. Got a nice pan of resin. It's mixed pretty hot. A pretty good bit of catalyst in there. You can see there's a definite redness or pinkness to the resin because it's fairly cool tonight and we're working on a big panel, so we should use this up pretty fast. Here we go. This should lay right back over. We'll just take our time laying this down, being sure that it hasn't wandered off. That's one thing I like about this biaxial cloth though, is it does seem to hold its shape pretty well, not distort too much. When I was younger, I used to always try to work it, get all the white out of one little area before I moved to the next. But my father, he told me not worry about that. Just get some resin on everything. Let it start soaking through, and it's much easier, in my opinion. Let that kind of fall in love a little bit. Just let it mingle, do its thing. Gravity is working for us here. It's helping to pull that resin down into the biaxial. I had one of my clients told me that might be the more accurate pronunciation. So we're to the bubble busting phase. Y'all, we've got the glass laid down. We're using a little grooved roller. We call that a bubble buster. That's aluminum. They make some out of nylon. And you can see the difference here again. Much darker where we've rolled it. You're gonna see the bubbles kind of work their way out. It's impossible to get every bubble out. Kind of working from one side to the other, out to the edges. Woo! All right. I think that's looking pretty good. Y'all, it is like Saturday night. It's well after dark. We've had a super busy full week. This is probably going to be the end of our video. If you guys have made it this far, I want you to know how much I appreciate y'all watching the channel. Of course, we got our fishing content, but a lot of you folks seem to be really interested in the boat building stuff. If you like the video, please remember to give us the thumbs up, the likes, the shares, the comment. That actually helps us do more of this, helps us grow the channel. And again, sincerely, I genuinely appreciate all the views and everybody that's taking their time to watch our content. It's Captain Joe here with Island Marine Charters down in Gulf Shores, Alabama, and Fish Bump TV here on YouTube. And as always, we will catch you guys next time out.